Hello, my friends. I'm back again, speaking with authors, luminaries, influencers, and people who are making a difference, but also continuing our conversations on science and spirituality as well. And today it's my great pleasure to welcome Elissa Epel, PhD, Dr. Elissa Epel, with this beautiful little book, 7 Days to More Joy, The Stress Prescription. And so thank you for joining us.
Deepak, thank you for having me. It's so good to see you.
Yeah, great to see you. I've been reading the book and I find it extremely practical, which is something that, I'm not good at. I've spent my life talking about the abstract and, a lot of people say to me, what the heck are you talking about? But this is a really practical book. And I want to first congratulate you. I've been reading it and it is what it says. It is 7 days to more joy and ease. So let's go a little bit with your background, Elissa. I know your background as a scientist and an explorer of consciousness, but I think our readers would...
Well, let me just say that your lineage is in this book. So while you do push the edge and you're so devoted to understanding consciousness and non-duality, you, by example, live the practices. And we'll talk about this, but I've had the honor of studying you as a teacher and people's experience on retreats. And there's nothing more motivating to me. The mystery, the beauty that we can't always show we'll never really show with material science about being a human in the mind. So I'll just say, I appreciate your humility, and what you have done has been transformative for humans, really, really globally.
Thank you, Elissa. Let's give our audience a little glimpse in your background, your scientific background, you're exploring, and how you came to write this book. Let's talk about that, the background.
Yes. So I really grew up in a kind of a sciencey home, and I spent summers in Woods Hole in science camp, just looking under a microscope and really trying to understand survival mechanisms and life and cells and that. So I was kind of a scientist early on, and then I did live in a home where there was a lot of talk about the mind. The parents from immigrant backgrounds moved to California and kind of embraced the human potential movement, and were trying everything, EST and TM, and so that was kind of set me up for merging of the two and fascination with the mind-body connection. And really early on, just trying practices like Qigong, feeling chi, feeling energy, and having it feel so real. As a child, you don't question it. You can change your mind-body state and feel sensations. And so that kind of opened up the mystery. Then I was in college and I thought, well, I'm gonna be a doctor. I'm gonna, be focused on healing. That was the obvious path for me. There were several things that changed. I took a class on then called Alternative Models of Medicine, co-led by students. It really was an exploration. And I read Quantum Healing. And that really merged the Western world with I'm not going to say the Eastern or the mystery, but really the observations of the potential, the inherent potential of the human body for healing, and the power of the mind and how we influence each other. And I thought, well, I better take all these chemistry classes and, keep that path open. But within several years, I made a U-turn and I turned to research, studying what was then called health psychology. It's kind of a more interdisciplinary field, but it basically is about the mind-body connection as well as the social world. So I've been doing that for about 30 years. It really keeps me entertained and busy and trying to understand healing and mind-body practices and retreats, both myself in my own N of one body, as well as getting to study them when I have the opportunity.
And you've been working with, or have worked with, Elizabeth Blackburn, Nobel laureate. She got the Nobel Prize for telomerase, discovering telomerase. And we have a study from a retreat that you were the principal investigator of that look at gene expression, telomerase, etc., in a 1-week retreat where there was absolutely convincing evidence that meditation, mindfulness, breathing, shift in diet could all actually activate the genes that are responsible for self-regulation and homeostasis. There was an increase in the level of the enzyme telomerase. And there are other studies that you've done with Elizabeth that show this as well. So, talking about the mind-body issue and the problem, I think the problem is the very fact of duality, that mind and matter might be separate things, when in fact what human beings call matter is an interpretation of human perceptual activity within a narrow band of the visual spectrum or auditory spectrum or whatever. But it's a useful construct, matter, but it also kind of bamboozles us to thinking that there are two separate things. There's consciousness, it's perceptual and cognitive activities, what we call matter. So if the two are different, I wouldn't be able to lift my arm or wiggle my toes or speak. It all starts with a thought, and then there's this very physical, biological response. So before we get into the book, can I have you say a few things about epigenetic switches that turn on and off based on whatever experience we're having, stress or joy or love or compassion or fear or anxiety or depression? Doesn't matter what the experience is. There's something happening at a very fundamental level, at the level of the switching on and off of genes and there are precise biochemical mechanisms for this, methylation, deacetylation. Talk a little bit about that before we go into the book, because I want people to know that this is totally scientific, what we are saying now.
Yes.
Or at least current science.
So, what good luck to live in the time of these, phenomenal arrays where we can look at every protein in the body that's being made like that. Take a blood sample, there it is. We can look at the epigenome close up and know every gene where it's closed off or opened up. These epigenetic bonds, these methylation bonds. So the genes we cannot change. We're born with them forever, our whole life. We pass them on if we have children. The epigenetics control whether a gene is expressed or not. So it's like, it can basically say, okay, I'm detecting, the body's detecting that you're growing up in a stressful environment, let's say during pregnancy. And so it says, let's gear up and prepare for a life of stress. If we know it's going to be adverse, we need to change how our stress regulation works. So let's make all of those genes super hyper reactive and fine tune that regulation, because that's our environment. We want to match our environment. So there's some of that happens as we develop in the womb. We're detecting what we need, how we need our genome to be expressed. But what's so fascinating is that our life experience shapes our epigenetics too. So once we're born, we have an opportunity to be shaping our biology in a positive, healthy way. And so some of it's under our control. And that's the beauty of understanding our aging, that we have more control than we think. Our genes are expressing proteins all the time. That's how every cell in the body is made up of the proteins that our body decides to express from our genes. So the epigenetics determine it, and other signals in the moment. And so what I'm so excited about is when we have the opportunity to study intense contemplative experiences like your 1-week retreat, which was probably one of the best controlled studies out there, we see dramatic changes in the proteins we're making. So we're remodeling our biology. It happens within hours. It happens with days. We got to see dramatic changes within a week. So with our machine learning and with the help of Rudy Tanzi and Eric Schatt, we could see that we could take a blood sample from someone day 1 of retreat, and then the day before it ends, and and predict with over 90% accuracy whether the person was coming from their busy, stressful life or whether they had a week at the retreat. It's just everything changes like tenfold. Not everything, let's just say dramatic change.
I'm speaking to Dr. Elissa Epel. The book is called The Stress Prescription: 7 Days to More Joy and Ease. The book is out in the stores. I just finished reading it. I want to go a little bit over these chapters, just the headlines. And because, Elissa, because in social media, there are certain channels that will not take our content if it's more than 1 hour. So we have to restrict the conversation to 1 hour. And I want to cover a lot of things. And, ultimately we'll be reaching like 25 million people. So let's actually go through these chapters one by one. And let me ask you to comment on each of the titles. That's it. So
okay, let's do that. Deepak, are we going to talk about the retreat again? Because I have one important result I want to tell you about.
Yeah, no, we can talk about everything, but I want to first finish the book.
Good.
And actually, I want to go on. I want to also talk about the limitations of human knowing, and also want to talk about the hard problem of consciousness, because I think these are all red herrings in one way or another, if we understand consciousness as fundamental reality. But let's go there later. Okay, so introduction: expect the unexpected. So that's very good, because, you mentioned quantum healing earlier. And just so you know, I'm doing a book with a quantum physicist right now, Jack Tuszynski. I don't know if you know him or not, but he's European, Polish, has a professorship in Calgary and many other European institutions. And we're doing a book together called Quantum Body right now, which I'll tell you about later. But since you mentioned quantum healing, I just, one of the principles of quantum physics is uncertainty, or what they call randomness or unpredictability. And I think those are very good concepts, although I don't like the word randomness. I like the word unpredictability. Random is inherently random, and unpredictable means I have no idea what's going on. Like when you go to Grand Central Station, you see people going randomly here and there, but each of them is actually going to a specific destination. And if I went there and statistically mapped out everything that was happening every day, I could even predict how many people are going to Philadelphia and how many people are going to New York. It's like the wave function almost. But expect the unexpected. Say something.
Yes. We can live our life wanting certainty, wanting control, and trying our best to wake up and have a day well planned and a life, following this trajectory. The bare reality is that we don't know. We don't know what's going to emerge in the future. And the more we can be comfortable and relax around the not knowing, the more we can really feel ease in life and not suffer as much. So we can even measure this tolerance for uncertainty in a little psychological scale. And boy, does that matter. That predicts when things get unstable and unpredictable. Do we tighten up and constrict and develop anxiety, avoidance, depressive symptoms, or are we able to surf those waves more? So I am someone who really likes control and certainty, and I have worked really hard to loosen that and give that up and wake up and just welcome the day. And the more we can actually sit back and follow what's most important, seeing reality as it is, being a kind person, welcoming and seeing the beauty as it is, that's just such a way, a beautiful way to live, versus how I have often lived. And of course, I still switch into that mode, which is everything's just filtered through a lens of stress, of rush, of striving.
So, I'm glad to hear what you said just now. When I was first getting interested in consciousness, I read Alan Watts's book, The Wisdom of Insecurity.
Mhm.
And recently, I was asked to write a foreword to it, many decades after he passed away. So I had the opportunity to reread the book, The Wisdom of Insecurity, kind of match it with some of the teachings of my spiritual teacher, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who brought TM to the world.
Mm.
And he would say that without unpredictability, there's no creativity, period. Otherwise, you're a biological robot. If you think you're an algorithm, then so be it. And so, when my kids were growing up, Malika, who's now 53 years old, and mother of a young woman who's at Brown University, can you believe that? I used to, every morning when we woke up, we would pray to the divine or to whatever, the higher consciousness. Let's make today more uncertain and unpredictable than yesterday. And if we do that, then nothing will ever go wrong in our lives. We start with that presumption. Please make, dear God, or whoever you are, make today more unpredictable than yesterday. You're all set, right from the morning ritual. So I love your first point. How to use this book. It's a 7-day read, basically, one day at a time, right? It's very remarkable, but that you can put all this knowledge in 1 week. So what would you suggest? People read this sequentially?
I think that if we had not much else going on, they would read it sequentially in 1 week and spend the day, um, giving each practice a good try and a repeat. But since we have the unpredictability and the other obligations, I hope that people pick it up with the idea of not creating more stress with this expectation and this, really high bar, and just go to the chapter that calls them the most and sit with that for a few days or a week, and then go to another chapter. So it doesn't have to be in order. The order really is from understanding intense stress states, red mind, and how we can live through that well, survive, and even grab stress to help work for us, to then how we sit with stress and might stew with it even when we're supposed to be relaxed, to deep relaxation states. So there is a progression from high arousal to really deep rest, but nothing needs to be linear, and we can absorb whatever lesson it is regardless of what became before. So I think this chapter stand alone.
So once again, I'm speaking to Dr. Elissa Epel. The book is called The Stress Prescription, 7 Days to More Joy and Ease. And what you just heard is Elissa saying, don't make stress management another stressful experience, basically. It's like going on a holiday and trying to plan every moment of the holiday before, and then trying to manage the holiday every moment when you have it, and then coming back and analyzing what happened, what was wrong with every moment of the holiday. The holiday becomes a stressful experience. Okay, I'm going to read a few other things and then we'll comment selectively, because we've covered a lot of what is in the book already. So day 1, things will go wrong, and that's all right. Day 2, control what you can and put down the rest. It's like the serenity prayer almost.
Yes.
Day 3, be the lion. And I enjoyed that chapter because you said you can be the lion and also you can be the gazelle. So let's talk about that a little bit. Okay, sympathetic and parasympathetic.
Mm-hmm. So in the absolutely elevated stress state, when we're just, let's say in the thick of coping with something, we are having this increased blood pressure and heart rate, but the really specific dynamics of it depend on our mind state. So the lion and the gazelle show that perfectly. They're both at the peak of their stress response. The gazelle is completely vasoconstricted. She might get wounded and bleed out. So her vessels are tight, and that's why her blood pressure is going up. And her thoughts are, this might be it if I don't flee more quickly. Lion is having high blood pressure too, but that's because this lioness is like, this is so exciting. I'm going to get this huge reward, dinner for the week. And so go faster. So the blood pressure is raised because the heart is pounding and so efficient with its cardiac output. Blood pressure and heart rate are high because of this positive challenge response. More blood is going to the brain, not less. It's oxygenated. And so these thoughts that we have shape this hemodynamic response. So we can just think about in any stressful situation, are we more gazelle-like or lion-like? We're a little bit of each, but we can actually shape our stress response online or before we go into a stressful situation by just resourcing ourselves, powering up with these positive thoughts of my stress response is here to help me. I am going to survive. I have what it takes. Or the opposite, just really giving up control and saying, I'm going to do my best with my resources and not beat myself up. There's this kind of muscling it, and then there's a more of a release or self-compassion. And so so both of those can protect us from having this, more of this over-exaggerated stress response and slow recovery and rumination for hours, etc.
Yeah, listening to you on rumination, I was just reminded of, when the kids were young and we took them to Africa and the safari. And it was very interesting in that whether it was a lion or a tiger or frequently a cheetah, as soon as the gazelle noticed that there was a tiger or a cheetah somewhere in the distance, the herd would take off like this. And then the cheetah would chase them. We saw this actually. Cheetah would chase it, or the tiger would chase it, mother usually, female, and find the weakest gazelle, obviously, and snap her neck, and then bring her back for the feed. And then the whole family would have a good meal, as you said, for several days fulfilled. And then everything settled down. The gazelles and the tiger and the cheetah all kind of settled at the watering hole. And they sat next to each other as if nothing was wrong. And, I realized that the difference between humans and these amazing animals is that they evoked the stress response in the moment. And when it was over, they never ruminated about it. And, they were back to the watering hole, sitting side by side. And they knew that the tiger was not hungry, so relax. Okay, when the tiger is hungry, run. I mean, it was such a natural thing to do. And it occurred to me that the worst use of imagination is stress. And the best use of imagination is actually creativity and joy. And both are available to us when we are in the moment. There's nothing wrong with the moment. The response, stress response, or the relaxation response, or the parasympathetic, both available right now. And, when I brought this up again with Maharishi many years ago, as you know, Benson died recently. I'm sure you're aware of that. But the earlier days when we were having conferences in Harvard, all about the stress response and the relaxation response. And Maharishi was kind of a rookie to the Western worldview at that time. After everybody had left, Benson included, he kind of called me and he whispered in my ear, he said, "What is this stress?" So I said, it's a perception of threat, psychological threat or physical threat or emotional threat. He kind of looked vaguely in the sky and he said, "You mean resistance to existence?" And I thought that was the amazing response to a definition of stress. Whenever we resist this moment, that's stress. And whenever we flow with it, it's obviously flow,
Absolutely beautiful. That's so amazing. And it goes back to your point of welcome in the uncertainty, bring me more uncertainty. And when we can welcome that, that is embracing existence.
And creativity too, right? So now let me read a few of the other chapter headings. Train for resilience.
Deepak, you said something very important. You said, in this moment, nothing is wrong.
Correct.
And I just want to invite everyone listening to check in, is that, can they see that in this moment, they can relax their nervous system, even 1%, because that's the trap that we're in, is that we hold on to the stress in whatever form that is for each person. It might be unconscious worrying, expectations.
What can go wrong, basically?
Anything. What can go wrong? And so that ability, like the gazelle and the lion have, to be in that moment when there's no real threat, and to peacefully coexist, we're not very good at that. So we need to remind ourselves.
Yeah, we need to train, which is what you're saying, train for resilience. So, my method of training for resilience is on the physical level. It's the practice of yoga, or, something similar, anything that increases flexibility in my body. But then there's flexibility in consciousness, which says that if things don't go my way, I let go of my idea of how they should be, trusting I don't know the big picture. But in the big picture, everything is as it should be. Otherwise, I only looking at a little fragmented aspect of the experience of existence. And there's a Vedic aphorism, actually. It says, infinite resilience is the secret of immortality. I mean, that's going all the way, but infinite resilience means total flow, right?
I love that, because even at the cellular level, Deepak, cellular resistance is the formula, the prescription for anti-aging. When cells can respond to stress well, they're younger and they live longer. So from the conceptual to the infinite, to just the basic fundamental mechanisms of the cell, stress resilience.
And now we're looking at some of these nutritional interventions, including adaptogens from Ayurveda, etc., signal molecules that actually do exactly what you're saying, help cells adapt to stress at the very local level as well.
Beautiful. Let
nature do the work. Say a few things about that, please.
So the mindset of stress, which it's our tendency, our default to adopt that, unless we're adopting practices, waking up with ritual, these ways that remind us that we're safe. And the beauty of nature is that it does the work for us, that when we're in nature, we're shrinking all of that kind of stress mindset, stress cognition, to be a very small world, and we're connected to the larger world. And that happens through our senses. So we awaken through all of our senses to be connected and automatically start the unwinding. It happens within minutes. And there's a lot of beautiful science in being immersed in green, whether it's urban green or sensory images and music and smells, or out in the wild. And that, I think, many people discovered during the pandemic, and it was a relief, so they could feel the relief. And what we need to remember is that we're just, the body is an animal that needs nature, that we are nature, and we can benefit from nature so much, as we also need to take care of nature. So I live in my head so much of the time, and I absolutely need to get out and broaden my visual horizons and pet my furry dog and just awaken the senses, or I'm just deadened being inside and being in my typical city lifestyle.
Very interesting that you say this, and you also say that we learned this in COVID. And yet during COVID, as we were looking at, our foundation was looking at meta-analysis, who was getting sick, who's getting inflamed, who's getting inflammatory storms. there was a common factor in all the people who got really sick, and that was sympathetic overdrive, inflammation, and what frequently we were calling free-floating anxiety or depression, where the person didn't know the cause. And then at the same time, children growing up with young children, parents who'd never been out of their local environment, and they thought that everything comes from a computer, the world exists in a computer. These are, we are calling these kids digital natives or whatever, but they've had no idea. They think food is a 3D printout from a computer, that the world exists in a computer. And, we can see certain colors in our computer. We don't really have to go out or be with nature. And yet, as we were in our cages, in a sense, nature was repairing herself, The trees were breathing for the first time. You could see the Himalayas from 400 miles away. Fish were returning to dead lakes in Venice included, and birds were singing, and people were breathing in Hyderabad or Bangalore. And we didn't learn anything from that. We come back and we're back to our normal way of desecrating our planet, which is our extended body. And now there's all this literature on, forest bathing, on the fact that the earth is a battery, that when you walk barefoot or you touch a tree, that negative ions come from the earth and neutralize free radicals, circadian rhythms get reset. I think it's totally underestimated how nature heals.
Yes, I agree with you. And while we have gone back, I think we are also different. There is an awakening of more people. We're more part of this social tipping point. We don't know if we'll survive as a species, but yet many of us are having this awareness and turning towards sustainability. And if we can just realize our interdependence, even of our actions, that we all need to tilt and tip together, I feel like it did change our trajectory a bit. And, I try to focus on not what the media says, which it's devastating headlines about what we're doing to the environment, but the number of people who are now activated and aware, and that, what we can do in our small lifetime, that we're going to be having a different trajectory in the future, less suffering for our future generations. That's what I hope. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the earth is a battery. There are effects of an emerging scientific literature on grounding. And I hope that we can get as good as we are in examining the omics of the cell, in the form of us understanding the energy transfer and between people, between us and nature.
I'm speaking to Dr. Elissa Epel. The book is called The Stress Prescription, 7 Days to More Joy and Ease. I think we've given you a little bit of a glimpse of what's in the book. The book has a full 7-day program and then a nice summary at the end, renewing your prescription. It has a very extended reading, further reading and resources lists, and lots of notes. So if you read this book, I'm telling all our audience, it could very well save your life. And it's simple, it's straightforward, and it's practical.
Thank you so much, Deepak. That's why it's a prescription. It's like, we need to take this so seriously. There's no question. Stress is the common precursor to suffering. And we don't need to live with all this excessive stress.
As you were speaking and we was talking about the practical aspects of this book, a thought came to me, and that is something that has become very important to me now that I turned 76. I'm not even 75, I'm 76. No, I'm very healthy. Biologically, I'm very healthy. I think if you measured my biological markers, it would be certainly less than 50. At least I feel that way. But, in the tradition I come from, and I wasn't going to plan speaking of this, but so what? Now I've realized I'm a traditionalist. So, the Vedic tradition, there are 4 phases of life. And, the first 25 years, and they're called ashrams, by the way. Ashram means the home that you identify with. So the first ashram, 25 years, is education. The second 25 years is fame, fortune, artha, money, material success, family, etc. The third is giving back. And the fourth, which I entered over a year, is actually realizing that it was all a dream, it's over, and preparing for the final curtain that we call death and self-realization. So I spend 2 hours every day before I sleep doing yoga nidra, withdrawing the senses, and then going a little deeper into, the source of all experience, which we call transcendence. And some very strange things are happening to me in my life right now, like I hesitate even to speak on this on social media because, people will immediately come from both sides. But, I've been having in my sleep, once I transcend and explore these so-called Buddhist bardos and lokas and realms of existence, in the last several months, a Tibetan master started showing up in my dreams. And then I would open my eyes and see the apparition, literally in 3D. And then he passed away recently at the age of 107. And the apparition, which still appears when I open my eyes, is no longer 3D. It's kind of it's like a flat screen, like I'm seeing you right now. But it's still there. Yeah. So, I said, what the heck is going on? But I mean, we are trained as scientists. And, no matter what we understand of mind, brain, body connection, the world beyond the physical seems alien, esoteric, maybe in our imagination. And then yesterday or 2 days ago, I saw this latest issue of The New Scientist, and the cover story is The Body Electrical. And then as I read the story, a new term was introduced in the story, in the cover story, electrome, not biome, electrome, that the unit of experience at the most fundamental level is electrons. And, when I touch something, I don't really touch. Electrons bounce against each other, and the experience is sensation. But the world is electrical, the universe is electrical, the body is electrical, and the electrome is the unit of that electricity. So I went on ChatGPT and I said, could the electrome be quantum mechanical body? Or could the electrome be the basic unit through which the physical body is constructed? And these esoteric traditions, they talk about the astral body. Is it another frequency domain of the electrome? Now I was also fortunate enough to be gifted an advanced version of AI, which is way beyond ChatGPT. And Microsoft is experimenting with it. And I got one of the earlier adopters in there. So I asked all these questions. And the AI said, can't answer your question. It's not part of mainstream. It kind of gave up in the end. But I think we're on to something very exciting when we understand that, consciousness can vibrate at many frequencies. And the one we see as everyday reality is just one particular frequency state of consciousness. And, it's a very narrow band of activity. So I just wanted to share that with you, and now I'm sharing it with the world. And
I appreciate you sharing that. I know people love to attack you and the skeptics, but I don't
okay.
think, I don't think
Okay. So
that
now, both stage of life, it doesn't really matter.
yeah.
But
Well, this idea of seeing the perceptual limits and perceptual experience like you've been having that people are hesitant to share it's so beautiful, these experiences. And I love to think about how the ability to be silent, to have silence, to be on retreat opens up doors for that. And this gives me the opportunity to tell you about a finding from our study of your retreat that we didn't get to publish. We didn't publish, but didn't belong in our gene expression paper. But it is interesting, and this may seem obvious to you, but to me, I love seeing the numbers here. And that is simply that we had the opportunity to compare how people view their life, their self-identity. And we had three groups. We had people who were long-term meditators. We had people who learned meditation that week for the first time, and we had people who came for vacation, never meditated. And so we asked them a question, who am I? We asked them to ask themselves that over and over and to write down their answer. And the people who had never meditated had 0% of being someone who is interconnected. So their answers were their body or their social roles. I am a mother, I'm a sister, I'm a lawyer. And so their list was very much in the material world. The experienced meditators had this high percentage of identity of being connected. I am nature, I am God, I am you, I am love. And so they're seeing this and feeling this connection. And the new meditators were right in the middle. So they had adopted some of this non-dual identity.
Elissa, that's fascinating, but I think it's worth publishing separately as an abstract somewhere, this whole notion, because it fits in with the non-dual identification of the causes of human suffering, which are called the 5 kleshas. Number 1, not knowing the answer to who am I. Number 2, clinging and grasping at experience that is ephemeral and ungraspable. Number 3, recoiling from the same. Number 4, confusing yourself with your selfie, called the ego. And number 5, the fear of death. And according to our scriptures, the answer is in the first question. If you know who I am, then all the other kleshas, as they're called, disappear. So that abstract is worth publishing, I think.
With that context, it really makes it more meaningful. Thank you.
More meaningful. Well, I think we've come almost to the end of our conversation, but we can continue. Maybe after you get that little thing published, we can talk about, the limitations of human knowing, etc., through this amazing thing that we call the human nervous system, which has evolved only, to the extent that it has evolved only through the use of language. And without language, we wouldn't have this scientific edifice that has created the human experience of the universe. But I thank you very much for joining me today. Once again, the book is The Stress Prescription, 7 Days to More Joy and Ease. Very practical and very doable. And you'll be surprised that you can, in fact, have a stress-free life and have more joy and empathy and compassion and equanimity, which is ultimately. Oh, by the way, I was also, interviewing just 2 days ago. I interviewed Joel Primack, who you may or may not have met, and his wife. And, he's the author of the dark matter, dark energy concept, that 97% of the universe is unknown or unknowable, but we somehow got talking about emotions. And I mentioned the divine emotions that's described in the Buddha, empathy, compassion, joy, equanimity. But he said there's something even more divine than all of those. This is coming from a cosmologist. I said, what is it? And he and Nancy both jumped in and said, it's awe. It's awe. It's bewilderment. It's wonder. We have this capacity for wonder and bewilderment. As Rumi said, exchange your cleverness for bewilderment. With all the science, I mean, we have no idea why we exist or why there's even awareness of existence. So I think we'll close with that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It really does. It's a transcendent emotion. It brings us to the humility of being human and the beauty, right? That we can experience this wonder, that we can at least go that far in our perception.
And scientists are driven by that wonder, right?
Absolutely.
That's the
Yeah.
basis of science.
Keep this.
Elissa, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Deepak. Such a pleasure and honor.